Art Fahie was born in 1947 in Brooklyn, New York, a densely populated area with never a quiet moment. The sound of ice wagons, fruit carts, and the New York City subway system became part of his DNA. Whether it was music, Lincoln logs, or model trains, his early childhood was largely spent visualizing things. Obviously, it came in useful later in life. So getting into the hobby was, realistically speaking, just a leap into a world with expanded possibilities. When he hit the glass ceiling in his work, he made his way into the model business and started Bar Mills. So I'm going to be showing the slides tonight. So Art, take it away.
All right, Jerry, thank you. What he said was true. You could hear, I used to sleep in my grandmother's basement, and her house was no more than 50 feet from the BMT line in Brooklyn and Queens. And when the trains went through at night, the wall shook, and I experienced every train every night. And it just really was part of the DNA. Between that and moving to Long Island and finding myself pre-air conditioning days, of course, with the windows open, and being able to hear the Long Island Railroad from Hicksville, which was a major station there, all the way to Plainview, which was a suburb that we lived in, a good 6, 7, 8 miles away. You could hear the trains on any good hot summer night, as we all have probably been through that.
Bingo.
Well, you know, actually, we built the station in 2005. We started the company almost 25 years ago in 2000. And I actually built, that's a copy of the Strong station that was on the Sandy River and Rangeley Lakes Railroad. And I built that out of plans and railroad model craftsman. And actually, it was a little smaller in the RMC plans. And I drew it and I redrew it. And then I actually built a model of it. Banta had a model of the Phillips station, which, you know what? I wasn't counting on this. So I took Banta's Phillips station and I kit bashed it into a Strong station. This is the original station that I built, that our building was. This was Banta's kit turned into a Strong station. And this model sat in the middle of this station as we built it. All the neighbors thought I was building a church. The builders thought they were building a garage. But we went by the actual model and the plans and railroad model craftsman, and yet I've never received a scratch building award for this thing. which dumbifies me a little bit. Anyhow, I started in the hobby as all of you have, with a Lionel set ripping around a tinsel laden Christmas tree. Never left it. Quit a few years in high school, and then after I started actually working for a living. But I ran into a situation where I started writing articles, and the articles went from one stage to another. And eventually I ended up, and you'll see this over the next couple of slides, I ended up with Northeastern Scale Models. That's not Northeastern Lumber, which is Mike Sarno, which they hired me to develop kits, and that lasted about 2 months before they let me go. So that's the only job I was ever fired from. Apparently I wasn't up to model railroad kits. So that's how the whole thing started. And we moved to Maine in 1998. And 2 years later, we started Bar Mill scale models. And I started up basically with an old HP4 laser jet, if you know what that is, if you remember those things. And they were not cheap back in those days either. And a $600 payment for a universal 50-watt laser system, and a $600 back-end payment for the same system. So $1,200 and a black and white printer. That and the idea that I wanted to do billboards. Why I wanted to do them was because I had designed them and went to not one but 2 other companies that fluffed it off as not a good idea to do billboards. So basically, you see the station, which by the way is where I'm sitting right now. That's the SN2 layout to my rear. I'm in my office. Hopefully the lighting is good enough. And you see the, unfortunately, it almost looked like that bottom picture this morning. We came very close to we had a little snow, but not that much. But it shows the station nice and clean and cool looking. I did leave out for guys like Gary Kohler, who I know are going to look and say, Artie, you left this out. I did leave off the 2 smokestacks on the top of the station. Okay, and Joe Foose, by the way, Sir Richards was doing work for me at the time, and he did all the custom work with the doors, not the windows, but the doors and the cupola were actually built by Joe in his home in Pennsylvania. We started with billboards. You can see one there. One thing I always wanted to do was build things in more than one scale, because while I've been in HO scale I was doing N scale at the time, and I know that minority scales, whether they're N scale or S scale or O scale, don't really get taken care of very well. So I wanted to do something that was scalable. I was told, number one, the billboards would never sell. Number two, if you do them, only do them for HO guys, because that's where the price point is at. Well, we've done about 30,000 of them, and it was all done with one laser in the beginning. We'd open up at 8:30 in the morning. I'd work till 8:30 at night, let the laser run till 11:30. It was a very long cut. Have someone come in after work at 11:30 at night, work till 3:30 in the morning, continue the laser going till 8:30 in the morning. I'd walk in, the laser was still on, and it would start all over again. One laser. And that's how we started this whole thing. We also had something called the One Kit, which I could get into, but it was a very conceptual kit. And I know there is a time crunch here, so I will not get too heavy into that. But if you've seen it, it's the kit that builds nothing. The idea is it's walls and windows, and you have to put your own creative energy into it. And of course, that was a little bit tricky selling at the outset, but 25 years later, it's still selling. And the Idaho Hotel, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with and maybe even have it, was based on a prototype. And the big thing there was we were contacted by the people that owned the real Idaho Hotel. And we were told that the gentleman who owned the hotel was actually dying at that point of brain cancer. So there was a rush because he really looked forward to seeing that kit. Okay, so that's basic product line history. There's so many products though. I am not a big corporate kind of guy when it comes to mission statements, but my feelings about the hobby are to work in multiple scales, as I've mentioned to you before, and not necessarily be a collector's kit. I had never built a fine scale miniatures kit. I had never heard of Bob Van Gelder, who these guys are friends of mine now, but at the time, being an N scaler, I was really not subject to that kind of modeling. The one thing we've all been familiar with was Leo Campbell. And back in high school, I built a Campbell's kit, and I think it stuck with me, the way he themed his kits, the way he set them up on dioramas. So the thing of it is, by today's standards, they're kind of crude. And I hear that sometimes, and I don't think people have, it's like it's a revisionist history. I don't really think they realize what was available back in those days. I think they were great. By today's standards, technically not, maybe so much because of the way we do details and windows and so on. Another thing is guys like Jim Mooney, our engineer, or Jack Ellis, our head builder, were guys that were modelists just like any of us in this room. And they gave me ideas, and I didn't turn them away, as I had been turned away with the billboards. I think it's important to listen to other modelers. That's a very big deal for me. The other thing is answer the freaking phones. Make sure that you handle your customers. We've had Christmas Eves where I've told the guys, get on your cell phone, go through our customer list and start making phone calls, wishing people a Merry Christmas. And the guys on the other end of the phone, this is Bar Mills and you're calling me? You know what, we're all a family. This is a family hobby. I take it personally. I've got another year and a half before I retire. And I am proud of what I've done. I'm not saying everybody else is proud, but I felt I've done something and done it well enough that I can feel good about it. So take care of the customers, take care of by doing that, we're taking care of the hobby. And that's what we have to do, you know. I wrote this here, it says the narrow gauge conundrum, because there's certain confusing things about the hobby. And you can see the text on here. You don't have to have me repeat it to you. But these are not necessarily narrow gauge buildings. This is actually something called Cemetery Hill, which is a diorama that we released about a year ago. I built this particular diorama. I have to admit, I did it in 6 days. When you're up against an advertising deadline, strange things happen. Okay, but I used a lot of unique concepts in here, such as individual boards for the building, which are actually index card stock laid over MDF. Okay, so they're individually laid on there to give that look. But I would be hard pressed to believe that even in this group of accomplished narrow gauge oriented modelers, which are basically, and I know it, a step above the average guy, that anyone would look there and say, boy, that they couldn't find a spot for that someplace, maybe not in that configuration, but something along those lines, you know. Please do not retire. Thank you very much. But I think God has other plans for me. But at any rate, this is from Cemetery Hill. anything from the laser cut cemetery fence to everything else. It took me 6 days, and Jack Ellis came over, helped me a little bit at the end with just the touch-ups to cover some of my mistakes in my rapid succession of trying to get this thing done. The only things, by the way, photoshopped is the sky. I do Photoshop my skies in my photos. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. Jerry asked me if I could provide some comparisons with narrow gauge, and I just couldn't do it because, see, we manufacture N, HO, and O, and we still have some S left over, but it's become too difficult to engineer an entire kit to sell 3 of a kit. We sell hundreds of a kit. And you can see here, this is the Cundy Hotel from the Cundy Village diorama that we released this individually. And this diorama was done many years ago. An incredible job of engineering by Jim Mooney. And I was looking through some customer photos. Now, the photo in the middle, I think, was the one that we built here, that Jack Ellis built. But on the left and on the right, those were just consumers. And you can see how well they came out. They were very happy with them. We've sold, this is not an inexpensive kit, but it's a very complex kit. And we have sold a crazy amount of these things, but you can see the difference in attitude. And as I mentioned here, you don't have to have a narrow gauge. I mean, having a prototype, if you're doing a prototype scene, that's an exception. But can anyone not see, and say not see the one on the right as being suitable for a possible narrow gauge situation? We'll go to the next slide. This is another thing we just did. And Al Judy, you mentioned before, actually saw this. He was one of the first ones. We did a little thing called State Marine. If anyone knows Tom Staten was a very big Roger Malinowski fan, as I think we all were. And I named something after Tom called State Marine, and I did it in HO scale. And it was a modest building. It went for like $35, $40, $45 at the time. And I wanted to do something like it in O scale. So I redesigned it and changed the siding, changed the windows, changed the roofing, changed a lot of things, and made a small, here again, that's an O-scale building there. I don't think anyone who's watching this broadcast has any serious problem with conceptualization, but it's so hard to tell people that a marine building that sells gas doesn't necessarily have to finish like that, as witnessed on the right, where it becomes a machine shop. And that's the O-scale version that we make. You can imagine that in any series of colors. I kind of like that one. It's probably more geared to the Northeast than many of your railroads might be. Okay. And, when we had I think Gary, I don't know if Gary Cole made it here, but everybody made it here for the 2007 Portland Narrow Gauge Convention. I know there was one after that we were not involved with. We were never invited to be involved with. But at any rate, when Bill Benter came by and Jimmy Booth, and I know you're all going, oh yeah, we know those guys, Charlie Getz, they were like, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't our competition, because I invited everybody out, and some of the guys felt a little stressed out by, well, we're going to see another manufacturer. But when they saw the way I handle this, because a lot of the guys, Brett from Sierra West, I know Bill Benter, they'll build kits 3 at a time. I try to keep about 3,000 kits in stock. So the thing is, what is a kit? And you'll see a little list of what we consider kits. The idea is to make these things available to the public, as well as do the special kits for the guys that are, well, more than a notch or 2 above, the norm. And this is just one shot here of the station. I have to believe at least somebody in this group that's watching this tonight was visited here possibly in 2007, where we actually had 600 visitors. And that didn't include the big feed that we had the night before the public was allowed in here. Okay, so if you have any ideas, there you go. That's just some of the kits we have here. The next slide, please. I did these just the other day in preparation for this. Jerry asked me to, beef it up a little bit. You'll see the SN2 narrow gauge layout in the photo on the left, and you'll also see some somewhat empty shelves. We've been having trouble keeping up, fortunately. The second picture shows simply a machine that we use to seal packaging, and way up above with those plain brown boxes, we've become a Woodland Scenics distributor. And as a result, we've been able to discount figures because that's the one thing from an outside vendor that we feel we could incorporate it into our kits, because whoever buys structures may very well want these things. And we were able to buy them at a lower cost and give our customers a good deal on them. And I think with the lack of hobby shops these days, it's kind of nice to be able to get everything at once, especially at a savings. The next picture over, it was actually a little platform on the far lower right where I actually used to build a lot of our dioramas. Okay, and here again you see a lot of kits. The yellow ones, the boxes with the yellow sticking out, are actually kit boxes that have been prepared, have instructions, have detailed parts, have bracing, things like that, but don't actually have the kit inside of them yet. Once the kits are in there, they'll be flipped around, so you'll see the finished side coming out. So we know we do have them in stock. And hard to see, but not important. Many of you may not know, but we have 2 floors in this building, and you can see the steps going up, and you can see many of our display photos that we use in train shows on that photo as well. These are just random shots, existing light, walking around with an iPhone, but maybe we'll give you a little bit of an idea about how we do things here. Jerry, the next slide. And this is, if you've been to Springfield or a national NMRA, but not so much recently, you'll see this display there. You'll see the photos in the Springfield display that you just saw hanging on the walls here, as well as our bigger dioramas. And our crew, many of you will know Jack Ellis on the left. You see Jim Mooney. The guy in the middle there, who looks very somber, is going to be the new owner of Bar Mills when the time comes. That's Len Lednam. You see the old Desert Fox back there. And then you have my beautiful wife, Nancy, and a good friend of mine, Pat Buffalino, back in New York. So when you see a display, you'll notice the big tent in the back. I'd like to think many of you have seen this, but we carry with us at the bigger show is a 10-foot by 20-foot display that we actually give clinics there, and they're ongoing and they're naturally free, and it's to support the hobby. This is not all about money all the time. That is simply not the way I feel about the hobby. Next, please. Now, on the left, that photo with Jack Ellis was taken inside of the tent. So you can see a back of a couple heads and a little jury rig system. We just flew down in August to Gaylord, Texas. We flew into Dallas-Fort Worth. We did not have a display. Yes, it cost us plenty of money to go down there, but we went down and we offered to give clinics. We gave 4 clinics, 2 pair of clinics, Jack and myself. And we, I wish I could show you the whole picture of this room. I had to sit on the floor to take the picture. All 200 seats were full. It's a great thing to be able to share the hobby. And here again, we've got to do more for the hobby and less for the industry. This wasn't about selling Bar Mills. This was about, appreciating, showing some appreciation to the guys that have supported us for so long and that might appreciate this kind of thing. You see the attendance was pretty great, and the rug was pretty gross, but that's the way they made them down there. Anyhow, so that's Jack there down in Dallas-Fort Worth. Jerry asked me about some new products. This is going to throw some of you. Some of you will say, "Oh, I've seen this before," but you haven't. Maybe you have. If you have, I apologize for saying that. We're coming out with a new line of 8 kits. Matter of fact, I've got one here. I'll hold this up. This is not done yet. I don't know if I get that in the camera because I can barely see it myself, like that. Okay. These are pre-printed buildings, but I like the idea of some of the things done by Clever and other companies, but I was never that enthralled about the 2D look of them, especially in person. And what I came up with is an idea of designing structures that were pre-painted, pre-weathered, had signs on them, but use a craftsman approach, such as wooden corner posts and resin and metal castings. Windows that were injection molded, especially for beginner kits, where you could put some details of people hanging out of the window or swinging a door open, and keeping everything for under $40 pretty much. And we're coming out with 8 of these kits. What you see on the left is a crudely built one that I had to do I did this in about an hour and a half. You'll see I didn't put trim along the roof, which I should have. It shows up clearly in the picture. A prototype for the one on the left is the one with my hand. You can see it's the same name, but it's a different wall section. It was a matter of working with graphics and trying to make signs look like they're on the wall and melded into the wall. And you can see in the lower right, that's another prototype with different textures and different signage. The whole idea is these are all printed, laminated onto a special MDF. They require little to no interior bracing, need wooden corners, a roof, and they come up like that. So for the average modeler or someone who does not need a foreground model, or someone who's possibly using something as a space saver, just a place to put something, these kits will be available this Christmas. So there are 8 different ones. I have a couple more behind me here, all the way in the other room, but we're releasing a series of 8, initially in HO scale. There's very little doubt in my mind that we're going to go O scale with this as well. And this is something, because it's fairly easily scalable, that we may have a shot at S as well. But if you were to look at these in person, and we did this, I did this. I put that one there that you see in the photo in front of a lot of our regular high-end stuff, and you couldn't tell that this one's printed. It was a little embarrassing. In the photo, you couldn't tell that this I put together in an hour, and the other ones took me like 3 weeks to put together. So it's pretty convincing. It's different. If you notice, we have our lights hanging out, and the signs are all on there. So that is what's coming out with new with Bar Mills. I think it's going to be a great way to get people getting away from plastic kits. Nothing wrong with plastic, but letting them slide into the higher end of the hobby and enjoy the look of it without having to develop every single minute skill that we really do use in everything we build. Every one of us is punching holes and planting rivets. But look at this, it's kind of all done for you, and pretty well, I think, too. I'd like to think so. So you guys are the first ones seeing this. We've never announced this. So input from any of you, either privately or through Bar Mills. If you want to give me a call, I will not give you my cell phone here because I know it'll be around forever on the internet. But if you want to contact me, feel free to. Okay. Next page. Or is that it? That is it.